And the goal of our organization has been to promote the preservation of farmland, historical places of significance from development, inappropriate development in the Skylands region. We have not always been popular, but we have been effective in our limited role. Sorry, apparently I have to click on the PowerPoint every time to make it go. So we got started because of a proposed warehouse in 2009. This is Franklin Township in Warren County. And if you can see here on, for those of you who,
Excuse me, but
yeah,
you're on the presentation that isn't showing on the video, so they're still on the front.
okay. Well, how does that work then? Aha. Now we're cooking with gas. Everybody can see Franklin Township now? Woohoo! Okay, so in the bottom left-hand corner of this, you can see the blue section. Those are the last two zoned industrial pieces of Franklin Township that have not yet been developed. So in 2009, these were zoned light industrial, and there was a developer named Frank Greek who decided that he wanted to build an extension of Port Newark on this parcel right here. It's 112 acres. My house was here and Pat's house was here. So you can see why it would be a concern for us, because it was truly right in our backyard.
Don't see your cursor.
What was that?
Don't see your cursor.
Okay, in the bottom left, the two adjacent blank lots were ours. So it's like blue, 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 white, white. That was our houses. So we got to talking, how do we deal with this? I happen to have 8 children, so I have lots of free labor. So we made up flyers, canvassed up and down the street. Kids on this side, kids on this side, sticking things on people's doors. And we put together a community meeting and said, let's talk about this. Is this really what we want here in our community? So it was at the Bloomsbury Firehouse. We had, what, 50 or 60 people who showed up, and all having the same question of how could this be built here? This is farmland. It's a 2-lane country road. We don't have the infrastructure for an extension of Port Newark. We don't want this kind of development here. So we started reaching out not only to the neighbors in the community, but to groups like the Sierra Club, the Trout Unlimited, any environmental group that we could think of, to encourage people to come to the meetings. Don't just take our word for it. Come to the meeting, see what's being proposed, and see if this is what you want in your community. So at the end of the day, we won. The Frank Greek developer pulled up his stakes, said this is too much trouble, and he left. After who knows how much money he put in, but he was gone. So that was in 2010, 2011, when that happened. Then it was quiet for a while, and but it didn't last. In 2018, we started noticing that there were trucks out on the property again, and diggers were out on the property again. So we were like, what's going on? So we would go to try to talk to the workers. The workers were like, we can't tell you anything about it. So we started filing requests for information from the town to find out what was happening. So here's what we learned. The Tobias farm, which was the one closest to my house, it was under consideration for being purchased by a company named Savafaya. I'm sure you've seen them. They're a rug company. I don't know exactly how to pronounce their name, unfortunately. They wanted to put in a 1.2 million square foot warehouse with another 2.3 million square feet of impervious cover, think asphalt, driveways, parking lots, things like that, on this 112 acre parcel of prime farmland. They were estimating 300 employees and about 700 to 800 trucks a day coming in and out. Then, next year later, the Heritage Farm, which is the next two parcels, we started hearing about another extension of Port Newark kind of construction that's being considered. This one originally started as 4 buildings, but as they're mapping the waterways, they've dropped it to 3 buildings, 844,000 square feet of warehouse or distribution center, 274 employees, 253 delivery drivers. Both areas were not on city water or anything out there or septic. So both projects would require a massive septic system to be installed. And the one in Heritage is only 700 feet from the Musconetcong River, just across the road. So one of the things that has been in our favor to some degree, and I hope remains so, is that much of Warren County is a karst topography. So if you're not familiar with what is karst, listen to on WDVR or WRNJ on Friday morning at 7:10, because we're going to be talking about karst. But basically, it's a kind of geology where there's water dissolvable rock. So things like limestone, where once water hits it, it eats it away. And the thing about karst, which is all over Warren County, is it creates caverns and it creates sinkholes. So it also, because the water filters through these different rock types, it also, normally that would be a purification process. But if you have contaminated water that's going through, what you have is contaminated water going into the aquifer and then eventually making its way into the river, because we know that there are lots of feeder streams on both of these parcels that take all that water and send it out to the Musconetcong. So let me give you a overview of some of the waterways that we're talking about here. So you can see on both of these parcels, on the Tobias Farm and the Heritage Farm, there's tons of water all over the place. And there are legal restrictions in New Jersey law about how close you can build to water, because we have to protect what we have, right? We don't want to poison anyone. So one of the things that helped us tremendously on the Tobias Farm is they knew there was water. They refused to acknowledge that there was water. And so it became this big battle because they couldn't build their 1.2 million square foot warehouse with so much water there. They would have to cut it up into several smaller ones to get around that. So we'll come back to this one in a second. Right now, the Heritage application has been a model for warehouse development. They've dotted their I's, they've crossed their T's. Our engineers, our people, our professionals haven't been able to find anything wrong with the application. So the good news is that they're following all the rules. The bad news is it's not helping us following all the rules. As I mentioned earlier, the original plans called for 4 warehouses. They've cut it down to 3 to accommodate these wider tracts of water at the top of the screen that you can see.
Could you explain what those green lines indicate for everyone?
The
green.
I have no idea that.
Well, where there's a waterway, where they have to be 300 foot from on either direction from the waterway.
Oh, that's what those are.
So where you see those green lines, between each green line with the water in the middle, like for instance, on the fields on the right, they can't build anywhere inside that zone.
those, yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's kind of what's helped out, because that's what they call the intermittent stream. It's not always there, but it leaves like a little riverbed behind, and that shows proof the water is moving through the property.
We actually have a cool picture of that we can show you.
Could you put this in presentation mode, because we can't see the slide very well?
It's in presentation.
No,
might
it's
be-
not. Just click
How
from,
about-
click from current slide up top on the left.
And there, current slide.
I think you're sharing the wrong screen on this then. If the other screen is showing the presentation mode, then the one you're showing still has PowerPoint on it.
Okay.
That's better.
That's good, Tracy.
Okay, but why isn't it going from current slide? Hang on, let's see.
We need an
Okay.
IT person volunteer to be in Sierra Club, so if you'd like to sign up for the position, we need you desperately.
And the irony of this is I do Zoom stuff all the time and I am baffled by yours, so I don't know what to say. But this is the proposal that was for the Tobias Farm, the 1.2 million square foot. You can see how huge that building is. And then we have the septic, the stormwater retention pond, and it totally ignored the waterways on there. So part of what happened with this, the developer had put in the application for the water quality management plan with the DEP. The DEP looked at the existing maps for the USGS maps, the county maps, the state maps, could see the existing waterways and that intermittent streams, these streams that come and go, as Pat referenced, were there, and they denied the application and said, no, you have to go back. 24 hours later, they rescinded that and approved the application with no explanation. Oh, there you say there's no waterways. Okay, there's no waterways. So we went back to the DEP and asked for a meeting. Can you explain to us why you approved this application? They refused to give us an answer, so we sued them. Yay. So that we could get an answer for what that was. So, and I'll tell you what came of that in just a minute. Oh, did I do that again? Did I take away the thing for you guys again? Okay. All right. So this is the map that just came out last week with Heritage, because the Heritage Farm, they have just put out their water quality management plan application. The DEP has given 30 days for public comment. So if there's something that you would like to do this weekend, feel free to email the DEP and let them know why it's a bad idea to build a massive warehouse on farmland here in Warren County. But you can see here, this is Heritage. This is the size of the proposed sewer system. Right, where it's pink. That's the sewer system, 700 feet from the river. If there are those of you who are worried about how the river is doing. So, as I mentioned,
It's switched on the computer, but not on the screen.
that's because I have to do it twice. So to give you a rough timeline, we saw in 2018 that stuff was brewing back on Tobias again. So we started getting the band back together. Things had been quiet for a while. And we found that in 2014, the township had rezoned it from light industrial to industrial. I live next door to it. Pat lives next door to it. None of us were ever notified because apparently they didn't have to from light industrial to industrial. But the industrial zoning allowed for this kind of development to be brought in. The light industrial was going to be like a doctor's office or something like that. This was a much bigger deal. So we, like I said, we had all kind of gone back to our normal lives after we won against the Greek project. So in 2018, we got back together and said, okay, they're back. What do we do now? So we started going to township committee meetings. And in May of 2019, the town said, oh, well, you missed the April meeting when we introduced this resolution to designate this an area in need of redevelopment, pristine prime farmland. And so now here in May, we're going to have a vote, all in favor. Aye. Now it's an area, it's a blighted area in need of redevelopment. We're going to do a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, so the developer doesn't have to pay taxes. They'll just pay money to the township that we can use for whatever we want. Any things that need to be done by the taxpayers, the people of Warren County in total need to pay for it. Franklin does not, because we just get this goodie pot and the developer doesn't have to pay any taxes to support the rest of it. Right, so for those of you who are not here, people in the audience are shaking their heads like, how can this be? That's what we said too. So, we protested and the township said, no, sorry, we only had to do an introduction and a vote. And, you know, you guys didn't have anything meaningful to oppose it apart from what? No, they didn't take that. So in June of 2019, we filed a lawsuit against the town. And in doing the information gathering, we found that our mayor and some of the other people in the township committee, but the planning committee had been having secret meetings with the developer. They'd taken day trips to the developer's other projects, and they'd been in discussions about what would the pilot be? What were they going to get a fire truck for bringing this in? The improvements they were going to make to the town. So as we kept uncovering these really shady looking things, the township said, okay, all right, we don't have to, but we're going to settle with you in January of 2020. We won't go to court over it. We'll just start over. So they started the process over of this redevelopment hearing, and then COVID hit. So everything got put on hold for a little while. Then they resumed in Zoom meetings. And again, come December of 2020, they said, yeah, it doesn't matter what your attorney said. It doesn't matter what your land planner said. It doesn't matter what your environmental engineer said. This is still a blighted area in need of redevelopment. So we decided, okay, so we're going to have to sue again, right? Because this just wasn't right. So in that meantime, between the time that they called it an area in need of redevelopment, well, let me just show you really quickly. This is drone footage of the area to show that there is indeed water on there. Right? You can see the water, right? I can see the water too. So we felt that this was not appropriate, what was happening. So Franklin Township, in the meantime, went ahead and called this an area in need of redevelopment. What is that? I'm so sorry, guys. There's the timeline there. So as soon as it was approved for again, as an area in need of redevelopment, the developer purchased the land formally in January of 2021. And you want to go to what happened next? Let me show you. It was pretty exciting.
They have plenty more approvals at that point.
Yeah, they were all like, yep, let's go. Let's do it. Let's build this thing. I've never had to
Yes, bizarre.
do this before. I'm terribly sorry, guys. Is that? Is it going? Okay,
On Zoom, we're on the update slide.
I'm on the
We're on the
update
update too.
slide. Okay, there we go. So everybody should be on the same page, right? We won? Right. So they buy the land for $5.5 million. They think we've got our redevelopment in hand. We're gonna build this warehouse. And the Office of Community Affairs sent Franklin Township a letter in January saying, no, we're not going to approve your redevelopment. It's inappropriate on farmland. And it was apparently a case-making kind of decision. Normally, the Office of Community Affairs, they don't get involved in the local stuff. They'll rubber stamp it as it goes. But there was so much outrage over calling this prime farmland that's so productive blighted, and using that as an excuse to tear it up was so egregious. We weren't the only ones who complained, and the township was sure that we had done something. And so they did an Oprah of the Office of Community Affairs and found that there were a number of others besides us who complained, including agricultural boards, individuals, and others. So in addition, a few months later, in April of 2021, the DEP, who we had sued over not acknowledging the streams, 3 years later, were like, okay, yeah, you got it, they're streams. Right, so it happened to be Earth Day, actually, when we found out. So we were all delighted about this and thought, yay, development's halted, we won. We went back to the developer and one of our supporters and said, I told you it wasn't going to work out. Are you interested in selling it now? Because they had been approached multiple times for preservation. They'd been approached by recreational clubs to say, hey, we'd like to buy this land, but to no avail. So now they had so much money into this that you would think that it would be time to cut your losses, right? And try to recoup some of that. But no, that's not what happened. So we kept our attorney, even though we were done and we had won. We kept our attorney and asked him to keep an eye on what was going on. And we found in the fall of this past year that the developer now went through the back door and asked for an administrative hearing to get around the April 2021 decision. So our attorney submitted a motion with the court saying we want to be involved in this hearing too. The DEP said, no, we don't want them. And the developer said, no, please, we don't want them. So we're waiting to see if the judge is going to allow us to opine on this backdoor attempt to get around it. As I mentioned, the heritage developer can't find one thing wrong with what they have done so far, which makes our job a little bit harder. So that's what started us in Skylands in Franklin Township. So we have found as we are moving along that there are other projects too that have bubbled up in Warren County. Some of them we've had no issue with. Like you remember the Ingersoll Rand plant, the giant massive thing on 22. We really couldn't say a whole lot about it because it was on a brownfield. They did end up taking a bunch of farmland behind the brownfield, which wasn't cool. But that's a massive project. 6 buildings, 3.4 million square feet. I personally have not seen the amount of truck traffic that I expected to see down there, but I did hear that they were trying to funnel some things through the railways to keep them off of 22. But then that's not all. Then we have the Phillipsburg Mall boondoggle down there. So again, another brownfield that you could kind of see that kind of development. But again, they want to take farmland that's adjacent behind the farm to expand onto that. Phillipsburg waterfront has been approved. That's a right along the water, one building, 360,000 square feet. Strikers Road. I've been here in Warren County almost 20 years. Strikers Road was just farms, right? It wasn't even a road actually when I moved here. They added it in later. And now there's warehouse after warehouse being built. And there's 3 more in the planning stages in addition to what's already there. You've seen, I'm sure, in the news, White Township. That started out as a 6 million square foot warehouse. We're down to 2.6 million. And Alpha, I just got word the other day that there's another one planning. I haven't been able to find the details on that, but it's another one coming down the pike. So just with these in Warren County alone right now that are in the queue, 13.3 million square feet. Equivalent of 231 football fields, not including the parking lots and the driveways and anything like that, or the septic systems. That's just the warehouse. So one of our friends in the Phillipsburg area that has been working on this for their group put together this overlay of the downtown Phillipsburg low-pat area, to kind of give you an idea of within a mile of what the congregation looks like here right on 22. So the designer actually for this map is here today. I was delighted. Anne Marie has been helping us put this together. We are trying to make a billboard in Warren County. So if you know of other warehouses that are existing or warehouses that are being proposed, please tell us, because we're trying to map them to get a more comprehensive view of what's happening. We all know about our little backyard projects, but that doesn't mean we know about everybody else's backyard projects. And I think it's important for people in our community to know the scale of what is being proposed here in this, largely historically agricultural community. So now I want to let everybody take a collective Zen sigh as you look at this. So this is Bloomsbury Road, which is where Pat's and my house, I moved, mine is. But it's just a soul repairing space. When you come up that mountain, you come up and you see the farm on the left and the farm on the right. And it reminds you why we need to be engaged in this and why it's worth talking about and why it's worth challenging these projects, because we lose this. So let's talk a little bit about water and why this is important. Okay, everybody at home, can you see this slide about the Highlands water? Yep, everybody good? Okay. So I'm sure that if you are part of the groups that care about the environment, you know about the Highlands Act. In 2004, the New Jersey legislature very wisely created this act that would protect our water sources. We are a largely industrialized state, and they were starting to see some of the impacts of water quality and water quantity here in the state. And here in the Skylands region, we are the feeder for much of the state. So they've designated these areas of the protected areas, the planning areas, to try to make sure that those stay safe. So as you can see, for those of you at home up in the Highlands region, that's kind of where we're talking about here, of where we live. So I thought this was a very nice definition of why this is important. The spread of impervious surface from parking lots to garden decks acts as a barrier to the recharge needed for groundwater. Without a filter, sediments and pollutants spill into the streams, lakes, and reservoirs. The destruction of New Jersey's forests leads to additional runoff. I mean, it's really pretty self-explanatory, right? We can't pave a parking lot over all of paradise and expect to be able to survive. That's just not how it works. So some townships have decided to conform, others have not, and that has consequences, which I'll share with people on Zoom as soon as I can figure out how to get back to my thing. Nope. This is crazy, y'all.
Did I lose it?
I'm looking for it. Okay,
I would cancel that.
oh. No, we don't want to do that. I don't even see that thing. Oh, hi, everybody. That wasn't what I meant to do either. Okay, somebody else needs to come look at this because I'm not seeing. I don't either.
You can't just pick your slide.
No, I don't see it. That's where you would think it would be, right? Is that it?
Can you pick on one of those?
Yeah.
I'm not, let me see.
See, this looks like. Okay, guys at home, what are you seeing? What slide do you see?
That decision has consequences.
All right. And you guys here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I can't figure out why it's saying cancel.
Tracy, that's only on your screen. We don't know, it's not showing you.
I'm not seeing it on my screen. Oh, you can't.
That,
Black box.
Yeah, okay. We'll just pretend that's not there and see what happens.
let's just go back and.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Oops. Oh, there we go.
Don't say
Cancel. Okay,
Share. Okay, why don't you go from current slide and see what
that's what I'm
happens?
saying. Okay,
That might-
everybody good? All right, let's try that. Ha ha! Now it's working. I don't have to do the double duty. Oh, it's not? It looks like it is here.
She's got it shared.
Next slide, backslide.
Do the side to side slide.
I don't know where they get into their share.
You see me clicking that, right? Okay. All right, do you guys see townships have opted out?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes.
all right, let's try from there. I'm sorry? What am I clicking? You guys, I really am sorry. I'm kind of embarrassed here because I do use Zoom on the regular.
Well, it's hard because we got this here too.
potential risk to the community now.
Yep.
Yes, I'm seeing something different. You've got this stuff too. Click on that X there, get rid of that, so you don't have to see that. No, click that away. And then check that, get rid of that, yeah.
Did it work?
Try clicking at the bottom.
They've got the menu on the top.
Right next to the bottom.
I'm not sure what I should be clicking, guys. See all slides.
Yeah, but your menu, all your menus are up top.
Yeah. And
Well, they can see it, so let's go.
all right, you guys can see it, all right? Everybody good? Potential risks to the community?
Yes,
So, okay, sorry about that. I really am kind of embarrassed. So as we've talked about, and with our planner and with others in the community, you know, what are the impacts of this warehouse development, right? And pollution is a big one, and it's multifaceted. If you've got trucks coming in and you've got diesel particulates, there are known carcinogens within that. And as 700 trucks a day are coming, 800 trucks a day are coming, that's being spewed into the air and eventually ends up in our water. For a lot of these, we have light pollution because they're going to be 24/7 operations. We have noise pollution. And I think that the water is a really big issue because it's not just a matter of contaminated water. It's also a matter for those of us who are on wells, and many of us in Warren County are, of water allocation, of water quality, of befouling the water that goes into the runoff into the river. And then what does that look like going downstream and into the Delaware? So we were holding a community meeting one day and a guy raised his hand and he was like, I'm really confused. If you've got 2.3 million square feet of parking lot and it's a hot day and it rains and all that water runs into the river, aren't you going to have massive fish kills? But I had not considered that as well. But there are a lot of consequences to this kind of development that people may not be thinking about as they're thinking rateable. I've got more coming. So if you're older like me, you might remember these commercials back in the 70s, but this was my first realization as a person that, hey, what I do impacts the land. And that actually kept me from throwing things out of the car window when I was a kid anymore. And it was so powerful just seeing this guy be so moved by the destruction that we were creating. So one of the things that is bewildering to me about New Jersey is that you can't stop projects because of traffic. And I don't understand why, because we see, and for if any of you guys have lived in this area for any length of time, you have seen a significant increase in truck traffic, and not just on 78 or just on 31. We're seeing them on the back roads as well as they're trying to get around to places. Where we lived over by Limekiln Road, there's a little bridge that goes across the river, and I have unholy and gleefully laughed at big rig drivers who followed their GPS and got stuck trying to get across the bridge. I know it wasn't nice, but it was funny. It really was.
Ugly.
It was. It took him a while to get out. I felt bad eventually for the guy. But we have accidents here. If you've been in Bloomsbury at all by the truck stop, It's insanity trying to get back to your house coming off of the interstate because there are so many trucks and they double park and it's not enforced by the police. There are laws in the books and yet it's still there. They're still doing it. And this is just going to increase that kind of issue. So one of the things that has frustrated me deeply is this ratables chase that we see that townships engage in, because they think, oh, we're going to make all these money from taxes. This is going to be great. We can buy this, we can buy that. But the reality is that there have been studies about what makes the best rateable for a community. And guess what it is? It's farmland. Because you don't have trucks on the road that you have to worry about aside from, harvest season. You don't have kids in school. You don't have police and fire that have to monitor your buildings. So it makes no sense to me, this false chase for things. You might know that in the Bethlehem, Northampton area of Pennsylvania, they have been deeply impacted by the proliferation of warehouses there. 11% drop in real estate values for those homes that are near those warehouses. And if you think about that, if let's say your house is worth $450,000, that's almost $50,000 loss, just right off the top, by virtue of the fact that you're near a warehouse. Not to mention, for the warehouses, there has to be infrastructure built around it, right? So the roads have to be widened, stoplights have to be put in, police, fire, all of those things. They're paid for with taxpayer dollars. So it's a false equivalent to say, oh, we need the ratables. So what do we do about it? So this is the meat of where you guys wanted to go, I'm sure, today, to find out how do we push back? How do we fight? So one of the things that is the easiest thing, but the hardest thing to do is to get your butt to township committee meetings and to planning board meetings. They're held every month. They're held at deeply inconvenient times of day when we would all rather be home watching the Big Bang Theory. That would be me. But that's when they hold them. So 7 o'clock, 7:30, I've seen them as late as 8 o'clock at night. So, but that's where you find your information. So one of the things that we have tried to do is to stagger people going so that not all of us are going at the same time, but I'll go and then report back. Was there anything on the agenda that we need to be worried about? The other thing is to review the master plan for your town and find out where are the areas that are zoned industrial that this could be a thing. I didn't know anything about master plans. I am from New Jersey originally, but I lived all over the country. Came back here 17 years ago and was like, what do you mean home rule stuff? What do you mean there's no regional planning? What do you mean about the master plan? This is all new language for me. So don't let happen to you what happened to us, where it was a cover of darkness and things changed very quickly from light industrial farmland to industrial warehouses. We didn't know because we weren't there. You want to be proactive with zoning. Under New Jersey law, if an application is submitted, you can't change the zoning then. Once it's done, it's done. So you have to get ahead of the applications and get those zoning changes in to prevent it from ever happening. There was something I saw a few months ago about in Clinton, Exxon was looking to sell off several hundred acres of their land for warehouse development. So I talked with somebody else in the community who had their finger on the pulse about this, and they said, don't worry about it. It's zoned so that they can't put a warehouse in. They can sell it, but warehouses aren't the thing that's going to go in there. And that was very smart of Clinton to do that. So you want to be sure when you're talking to your town representatives that you are making it very clear that, look, I'm here because of the beauty of where I live, and I don't want to live in Fort Newark. right? I'm from South Plainfield. We have all kinds of development and, yeah, that's why we're here. Yes, sir.
I'm who you talk to in the township.
What was that?
I'm who you talk to.
Oh, hello.
This really comes back around to the Highlands. It's not just our zone. It's not this.
Here, come closer to the owl so people on
Let me
Zoom
just
can hear
repeat
you.
what he says. On these is-
Go ahead.
It wasn't just our zoning. Our zoning does prohibit warehouses on the Exxon property. The other major component was that we are opted into the Highlands Regional Master Plan. And even if, in fact, our mayor and council had spent a year talking with Exxon offline to discuss this project. They could have said from the get-go, you just can't do this because we're in the Highlands. So it actually took the head of the Highlands Council contacting our town and reminding them, you guys are on the Highlands Plan, you can't do this.
Okay,
So opting into the Highlands Plan is absolutely key if the town can do it.
thank you.
So.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't misrepresent what you said. Township, yeah. So, for those of you on Zoom, I hope you heard that. Zoning is important and knowing where you are in the Highlands. So Franklin Township has opted out of conforming with the Highlands Act, and it's a problem. I don't know how you get to do that. The other tool that I learned about when we started this are OPRA requests, Open Public Records Acts. They are awesome. You fill out a form, certify you're not a criminal, and you can ask for anything you want to ask for in regards to a specific lot project. And that's how we got so much information about what was happening in Franklin Township and how we got the redevelopment piece overturned, because there was a lot of shenanigans that were happening there. We learned more stuff than we even thought was happening. So do that regularly. There was a lady that I read about last year in, I think, Bergen County. The town sued her for putting in too many Oprah requests, which I thought was crazy. But when you calculated it out, it was like twice a month that she was asking for information. And I think if you are a government representative, you have an obligation to be transparent with your constituents about what's going on. I don't think it's okay to poo-poo people and say, don't you worry about it, we'll take care of it, trust us. No. So another thing that's important is to know that once an application has been submitted, there is a standing involved. There are things you can't do anymore once an application's been submitted, like change zoning, because the town can be sued. So you want to challenge these projects before it gets to the point of an application. And that's hard to do if you're not going to the meetings and finding out what's happening and doing Oprah requests to find out what's happening. And you want to make sure that the people in your town know regularly, they hear from you on the regular, we don't think that this kind of development is appropriate in this area. And if there is a problematic application like we saw, be prepared to fight. And so you have to have your experts at the ready. So like, let's use Franklin as an example. In April, they put forward this, we want to do a redevelopment. And then the next meeting in May, they said, everybody vote, it's a done thing. That's 30 days to get your attorney, to get your land planner, to get your environmental engineer, to get all your people in a row, right? And then help hold hearings. So be thinking proactively about what is it that I would need if this comes to fruition. Good information about how to find those kinds of people, because most people wouldn't have them like on their Rolodex. And we also pay for things like, oh, wait, other things. So the question was, how do you find those people? Because most of us don't have these kinds of experts in our Rolodex. Oh, somebody's in the waiting room.
You have to call Tracey.
Let me just say, we've gotten our attorney and our land planner and our environmental engineer a lot of business because they did such a good job for us. We passed their names along and they picked up several other projects that are currently underway. But that's why if you saw the flyer when you came in, for those of you who are online, you'll see it in a minute. But we've been trying to work to put together this Green Garden State Alliance so that there are other groups, other opposition groups from around the state who have been through this, who you can contact right away and find out how do we get help? What should we do? So that you're not scrambling, trying to figure out what's next. So, yes, ma'am. Who pays for the lawyer? So the question is, who pays for the lawyer? Yeah, well, in this case, it was me. It was bad. It was a lot of our neighbors initially. And it's expensive. And this is really the crux of why we won, because we were able to cobble together money to pay for an excellent land use attorney, an excellent land planner, and an excellent environmental engineer. So, and it wasn't cheap. It was, what'd you say, $40,000 for the first go round. And then the DEP suit was another $9,000 that we paid. This is one of the reasons that we became a 501c3, so that we could apply for grant funding, so that it wasn't just us. But in the immediacy of we have to hire somebody now, yeah, we and our neighbors kicked in a fair amount of dough. The other thing is you want to do this as well at the county level. They need to know what the constituents of the county think. At Warren County, we have been fortunate that Jim Kern, who's the county commissioner, has been very supportive of keeping warehouses out. He's not going to get involved in an individual town's application, but he did commission a countywide traffic study to see what would the impacts be. He's encouraged township leaders to talk to their neighbors and try to do some more outreach on regional planning. Those are really important things. Yes, ma'am.
About regional planning, is that a lot of other places came back on home rule and town by town plans. Could you speak to that? Because many people may not be aware.
Sure. The question was about, could we speak a little bit about home rule versus regional planning? So if anybody else in the audience knows better than me on this, please do correct me. But my understanding is that here in New Jersey, we really don't do regional planning. Town by town, you get to decide what it is you want for your town. So with this example of Franklin, it borders Bloomsbury, which is in Hunterdon County. And the place where they want to build these two warehouse projects are right along the border with Hunterdon. So Franklin officials were telling townspeople, don't worry about it. It's not us that's going to get hit. It's Bloomsbury. They're the ones who are going to have to deal with all the trucks. That's being a bad neighbor, in my opinion. So I actually ran for township committee, didn't win because I'm not very popular there. But that was one of the things that I ran on, was regional planning. This is something that we should be talking about, as well as transparent communications. You have to come back up here because you're a soft speaker, man.
You're absolutely right that town planning is key, but there is regional planning in New Jersey. They just don't do it.
Okay,
There's a thing called the state development redevelopment plan, which is supposed to be redone every 3 years. The last time it was done was probably 15 years ago. The state regional master state development redevelopment plan basically has towns get together as a group or as a region and go over their own master plans as a region and submit the proposals to the state for approval. So towns used to do that. The last time we did it that I can recall was 2006, I think. And the plan we submitted for our region along 22 and 31, 7 towns, picked off the state. And so they stopped the whole planning process. Under the law, they're supposed to do it every 3 years. It's critical who we elect, locally, county, state. Elect people who, when they come to your door and they say, I'm running for office, I want to lower taxes and I want to have better schools. First question to ask them is, what's your position on land use plan? And if they don't know, they can go find out. Because once you have them in office, you have the kinds of people that Tracy's talking about. We're going to cozy up the developers for all kinds of reasons. They're not bad people, they just like doing it. And then it's all over. Unless we change our legislators in Trenton, existing regional planning requirements are going to be ignored. So think hard about who you vote for. Not your friends, not your friends' friends. Well, this is a really nice person. What is their land use position? And they're not going to have one. So you need to educate them a little bit.
Thank you.
So there's regional plan.
Thank you. So one of the other questions to ask is, why aren't you conforming to the Highlands Act? Why aren't you protecting our drinking water? And the New Jersey Office of Planning Advocacy in November put out guidance on warehouse planning, so that towns have in their hands best practice instructions on what to do. It's not required, it's optional. So if you have a town that's in a ratables chase, chances are they're not going to look at that. But you can bring it to their attention in a township committee meeting or a land use board meeting and say, did you know that this exists? And are you using it? Hold them accountable for what they are going to do or what they're not going to do. Yes, sir.
What was the logic of your council were opting out? Or was there a logic?
Was there a lot?
There are a bunch. Well, they're asking why Franklin Township didn't go into the Highlands program. And they just think antiquatedly. They don't look to the future. They don't. I don't want to call them a bunch of fuddy-duddies, but they're not looking to the future at all. They don't entertain what other mayors locally have to say that are more on board with, like Franklin Township, they stopped preserving land because they felt they had too much preserved. So they're done with it. All the funds that were in there, hundreds of thousands of dollars, is just getting used for other purposes. So it's just a matter of there's no mindset to participate and to look into the future.
And I asked Pat because he was on the planning board in Franklin, so
I get kicked off there.
he got kicked off. Yeah, they said, thank you, goodbye. We don't need you anymore. It's also important to be contacting your state officials. When we were fighting with the DEP about the river and of not recognizing these intermittent streams, we realized that the Musconetcong was federally protected as a wild and scenic river. So we went to the National Park Service, which has the jurisdiction over the river. And they said, yeah, you're right. It shouldn't happen. And so they interceded with the DEP and were ignored. So then we went up to the EPA, who said, well, you know, that's the DEP's business, not ours. But if you keep making enough noise, it ended up that we got Tom Malinowski to interface with the EPA, and then we got some traction rather than just us. One of the things that we haven't done, but we want to do this year, is attend the League of Municipalities in the fall. It's expensive. That's why we didn't go. It's like $800, and it's several days of being there. But it's apparently an opportunity to connect with some of these town leaders and talk about why conservation is important, why we don't want to tear up prime farmland in the middle of a pandemic with supply chain issues to build a warehouse. That makes no sense to me. Did that go? So, as we said earlier, if you know that there's something coming down the pike, you want to be proactive and get the right professionals on your team. Our attorney, just by point of reference, with a discount, $400 an hour. So we don't bother him with anything little. And we try to bunch up any questions that we have when we need to contact him. But it's important to get the right people. An environmental team, you want to find if there's any threatened or endangered species that are on the site, if there's any archaeological places on the site that could slow down the project. We hired a traffic engineer who is sitting on the report waiting for there to be movement on the Tobias or Heritage before we send him out for hearings once an application is fully submitted. We ended up using two different attorneys when we sued the DEP and when we sued the town, because the DEP and the town are two very different kinds of entities. One is the environmental piece, one is the very technical rules, land use rules piece. So the attorneys that we got that sued the DEP had actually been a previous DEP attorney, so he was awesome. Our land use attorney that we hired for the township, it was awesome, y'all. We had 200 people in the auditorium. He didn't ask a question he didn't know the answer to, and he just kept humiliating one after another. And it was really great to see all of the things that they were trying to keep shuttered be put out in the open in a way that they wouldn't do for us asking questions, but they had to with the attorney. So he was worth every penny. You also want to connect with groups like the Sierra Club, like Trout Unlimited, like the League of Conservation Voters, who care about the same things that you do. If nothing else, of helping to get people at these meetings when the hearings are happening, because it rattles the towns when there's a show of force. When there's 200 people that show up to a meeting that usually has 5, it freaks them out a little bit. And that's good, because you want them to be a little bit off balance in these hearings and not so smug. They need to be paying attention to what's going on. The other thing that we did that was super helpful is we got a drone operator to go over the site, to be able to document the things that we said were there. And we couldn't physically go on the property because it wasn't ours, but the drone operator was able to show all of these intermittent waterways. We were able to see where they were digging holes. We were able to look for things that we couldn't otherwise see on these very large parcels. And here is our little bobcat that was on our neighbor's property. Because we kept saying that the hunters around and the fishermen were saying, there are bobcats here, we know them, we've seen them. But we needed to document it to be able to show the DEP that there were threatened and endangered species on this site. So our neighbor got a picture of this little guy sitting on their septic system. So we submitted a report to the DEP that, you have to put in, you don't just put in the address, you have to put in the longitude and latitude coordinates, just throwing that out there. As well as photographic documentation to show that, yes, indeed, those were there. So the next thing is money. As we mentioned earlier, it's a pricey thing to get the right people, but it's crucial to win. This is one of the David and Goliath kind of challenges that we have often talked about. Developers often have unlimited resources. They have excellent attorneys. They know the rules in a way that those of us who live in these communities don't. And the way that you fight them is on an equal footing with equally well-versed and tenacious legal counsel. But it takes money. So you have to talk to your neighbors. You have to figure out, are there allies that are willing to support you? Fundraising, we had a wine and cheese one night. We've had an silent auction kind of a thing. We're doing a book signing in the fall for a local author. And if you're a 501c3 or if you attach with a 501c3, you can do fundraisers and ask for grant funding. So the Highlands Coalition is a group that is really focused on the water quality and protecting the rivers here in this area. They are also a 501c3. You can join them as a group and use their 501c3 status to do some of these things as well. If you don't have the bandwidth to become a 501c3 yourself. But it does open up the opportunity to get grant funding. And if you have a project that's an emergency right now, the Highlands Coalition does have a $5,000 emergency grant that you can apply for. That's what we did initially when we decided to sue the DEP. We applied for emergency funding so that we could at least get started while we raised the rest of the dollars for what we needed to do. So another thing that's really important, but it's also time consuming, is community awareness. We have found in our projects, as an example, the people who live along Bloomsbury Road, the people in Bloomsbury, very interested in hearing more about this project because it impacts them directly. Those who live in Asbury on Route 57, Asbury Anderson Road, not so much, because their thought was, this isn't going to bother me. That's down there in the other part of the county. So you have to figure out what is your story that's going to make it resonate with them to be important to them. For us, we use the river a lot. Do you like to fish in the river? Do you like to go kayaking in the river? Do you like to go canoeing, or tubing with your kids in the summer? It's going to matter to you if you've got diesel particulates flowing down there with you. So some of the strategies that we used, we've held community information sessions. One of our plans was to do it on Zoom, but we haven't gotten there yet, but we've done in-person ones, but that said, let me back up a little bit. We also found that we couldn't do it in our local community because Franklin Township would not allow us to use the firehouse. We couldn't use the school. We couldn't use the municipal building. They're blacklisted. So we've had them at other residences in Bloomsbury. We've been at the VFW, but there are forums where we have had cookies and water and come and learn about what's happening. We also set up a website, Skylands Preservation Alliance.org. We have a Facebook page that we try to post to every week or two, couple weeks of what's new in the community, not only about our project, but also like if the county commissioner has done something to help promote curbing warehouses. We'll share that. If the Musconetcong Watershed Association is holding a fundraiser, we'll share that. We'll cross post in addition to our own things. One of the most expensive things that we have done is before the hearings that we had for the Tobias farm, before every big hearing, we would send out a mailing to everybody in the town. Every household got a postcard saying, this is what's coming up. We hope you'll be there. I was in the post office in Asbury one day and the lady got her stuff out, saw the postcard and threw it in the trash. Aw, but I can't say that it's always effective, but it is a way to make sure that every household is aware of what's happening, and then it's on them. We also designed yard signs that we sold for $5. We bought a whole bunch of them, sold them for $5. So for quite some time, you could see them all the way up and down in the community. It's been a couple of years since we've done it. We should probably do it again. But it is a way to keep a reminder for people, an anchor that this is still an issue in the community. You want to talk to your neighbors? Like I said, I had a lot of kids, so I had them out passing out flyers. But other groups like the White Township group, they have gone to the county fair. They have gone to the farmers markets. They have gone to the vendor table at any kind of community day as a way to talk to their neighbors about it. Also, the press, we know that daily papers are really taking a hit, but there are online forums where you can send letters to the editor. You can submit a guest article, things like that. I just did an interview with a reporter from Delaware who contacted me because he's doing a whole spread about warehouse proliferation in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So you want to reach out to those people. He found me, but we've also reached out to reporters that we knew were focused on this issue. Community petitions, they really don't do a whole lot, but it does a couple of things on the other side. It gives people a chance to feel like they're part of a community. It allows them to solidify their support in their mind for what it is that you're trying to do. And it also is a show when you take it to your local leadership. We had several hundred signatures that we collected. They gave it to the town, who said, they probably, circular filed it as soon as we walked out the door. But it was a statement that we were able to make with our community. In fact, one of the things that we did before the pandemic was I had made a whole bunch of cookies and put a thing out on Facebook, stop by my house, get some cookies, sign a petition. And people did, and it was lovely. The other thing that we have done is we have talked to adjacent towns to say, hey, I know you can't really do anything about what Franklin is doing, but did you know that this is coming? And this is how it could impact your community. And raising awareness that way. Another important thing is to form partnerships. Who are your natural allies in this? So one of the challenges in doing this work is that you have a handful of people who are doing all the things, trying to herd the cats and make sure that you are managing your project. And it's really hard sometimes to connect with others in their little groups that are doing the same thing. But you want to be able to talk to each other and share strategies and ideas and show up at each other's meetings and have a bigger block. Another ally is the League of Conservation Voters that have like-minded people. Some of these recreational groups like the Rod and Gun Clubs, things like that. Our local Rod and Gun Club has been a tremendous ally for us in a number of ways. And as I referenced, this Green Garden State Alliance, during the downtime that we've been waiting for something to happen for Tobias and Heritage, because it's been on hold for about a year and a half, 2 years, we've been using that time to try to connect with other small opposition groups to get together and talk about what are our projects, how are things working, what can we do to help you, here's what worked for me, here's what didn't work. So we've created this Green Garden State Alliance as of last week. It's brandy new, so that's exciting. So there's a website, there is an email address, there is a networking event that is set up on April 2nd at the park in Mercer County, which we hope that people will come to and start to connect with each other, because our vision for it is that on the website that we'll have a landing page so that each county is listed and opposition groups can be listed under those. Who are the people to connect with? So if there's somebody here who didn't know anything about this Franklin thing, but they live there and they want to help, they could click on Warren County and find who to connect with for that. Here's the invitation. So I'll leave that up for a second in case you want to get your phone out and take a picture. So the bottom line, the biggest lesson that we have learned in doing this now for 14 years is that delay is our friend. That is the thing that eventually, for many of these projects, pulls the developer out. Because for every year that it drags on, it's costing them money, it's costing them time, it's costing them resources, it's taking away from all the other things that they wish that they could be doing. So whatever you can do to delay, that's what you want to do. I mean, as long as it's legal, don't go blow anything up or anything like that, but
Don't get radical.
yeah, don't get radical. But that's really the crux of how we manage this. So as we were talking about, in 2018, 2019, when we saw this project was coming down, we thought, you know what, let's give the town other alternatives. What are some options of things that we could share with them? Of things that they could do. And so this is just a partial list of some of the things that we came up with as alternatives. So if you have parcels that you're worried about that might be eyed by developers, you could make a list of alternatives to send to the town and say, hey, you know, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Franklin has been so focused on the money part that they hadn't really considered the quality of life part. So we actually shared this letter with Franklin with these options and they ignored it. And so one of our supporters went back to a township meeting a month or two later and said, we sent you a list. What did you think? And he said, I don't like Tracey Heisler, so I'm not reading it." So I hope you have a better working relationship than I. So if you're walking away today, you know, like, how can I help? What can I do? If you want to help Skylands, there's lots that you could do to help us. You can donate so we can pay for our attorney for this next round of fighting. But one of the big things is to comment on the water quality management plan for the Heritage Farm. And if you want to email us at skylandspa@gmail.com, we can get you a template letter to send out. You can come on our board, come to meetings. We need a webmaster. Yeah, webmaster. We need a social media person because I'm super slow at stuff. But any way that you want to help, we would be delighted to have you. So I know that the idea was for this to be till 9, but I wanted to leave some time for questions. There's some things here in the chat.
You know, I could
Yes,
say
sir.
one thing, that one of the problems that we're having right now, because I'm obviously part of Sierra Club and part of Skylands. But it's kind of this lull in the action. When there's a proposal out and there's meetings and hearings, you can kind of get the troops up and going to come to meetings and speak out and participate. But when you have a lag of like a year or two in between something happening, you kind of lose that momentum. And that's a struggle that we have, and that's why, you know, the group and Tracey have tried to get these other organizations together to, you know, hey, we need some help. How do we keep people interested? How do we maintain that momentum without anything happening right at the moment? So to put up yard signs now is great, but there's no real, it's just a general statement versus something specific that's happening.
A call to action right now.
Right. Let's stop.
So does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. It's not really environmentally related, but just like one of the arguments that people put forward these warehouses were that it brings jobs and it helps when raiders in the community. So can you speak to that one?
So
So that we can make it work.
Yeah.
That really isn't true. I know a lot of times like with Amazon, bigger places, that's all automated, so the jobs that are coming in might be, you know, a handful rather than hundreds. And the other thing I've heard is sometimes that these jobs are just temporary. And then, you know, they're not long-term career type things.
you just answered your own question.
And
So the question was, what argument do you give to people who are in favor of these warehouses, who are saying it brings jobs and it brings readables? So many of these, the newer warehouses are automated. And the 263 employees, from the feedback we've gotten, include the drivers that are coming in and out. They're not in the warehouse because so much of it is automated. There are lots of, I'm sure, really great warehouse jobs. They just shouldn't be on farmland. And to me, that is the crux of the work that we've been doing, is not that we're not against warehouses per se, but we are against warehouses on usable farmland. The other piece of the warehouse issue is things like Amazon. Amazon had 4 New Jerseyans die this last year in their warehouses because of the working conditions. It's not all that it's cracked up to be. Obviously, that's not everybody, but people need to realize that there's far more automation than they think there's going to be, but the truck traffic, and it's not just truck traffic of big trucks coming in to deliver. There's also lots of smaller trucks that are going to be feeding out into the neighborhoods to deliver. So for those who think that the truck traffic is not going to impact them, it is. That's their whole job, is to deliver throughout the county, not just on 78 or 31.
Like
They
the
have-
ratables.
Pardon?
The ratables.
The ratables, yeah. I mean, I mentioned it earlier. The best ratable is farmland because you don't have the infrastructure. The other argument that I would give is that for all of the warehouses that come in, there have to be widening of the roads, upgrades of the roads, stoplights, septic systems, police, fire. Who pays for that? Those are public works projects. So for any ratable that you think you're getting in your community, you also have to look at the flip side of that of your taxes are going to go up to pay for these things. One stoplight is $1 million to do the planning and installation and everything. That's one. It's a whole lot more money than people think it is as an outlay for that kind of infrastructure. Not to mention, where are they going to go to the toilet? Where are they going to get gas? Where are they going to get something to eat? Those are all considerations when you have that level of traffic coming in. I hope that's helpful. Yes, John.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
As far as the statistics that you have, as far as that show that farmland is better than the warehouse, what do you actually have? I know a lot of times the developers come in and they say, oh, it's going to save every taxpayer $1,000 a year. So what do you have that yeah, like what tangible information of communities where that's actually happened and taxes went up?
So the question is about where are the statistics or the proofs that farmland is a better ratable. There, I don't have the exact study, but it was actually out of Rutgers that we talked to one of the researchers. It's been a few years, so I don't remember her name, but when Franklin had their master plan meeting and the woman who presented, do you remember her name?
No.
There was a woman who presented about the master plan, and I raised that issue about that being the best ratable, and she said, yeah. And then they went on. So I can find it for you, and I'm sorry, I don't have her name offhand.
If you can, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Sure. Emery?
Yeah, thanks. This has been great, Tracy. The one thing you mentioned was very interesting about traffic studies, that they're really not obligated to consider traffic. And I guess this is kind of a tangential thing, but is there a way that we can make inroads? And it's obviously the politicians have that in so they can help development. But is there a way that we could probably be being citizens to sort of work our way in there and try to get some controls over that? Or
So the question is around traffic, because traffic can't stop a project, but is there any way to make inroads in that? And that goes back to Trenton, to who you elect. The way that we have utilized traffic is as a way to engage people in consequences, because anybody who lives near Bloomsbury, going through that area at dinner time, trying to get home, or at exit 12 where they have the other truck stop, it's a zoo and nobody likes it. So even if it doesn't stop the project, it can engage people around being opposed to the project when they think about the reality of what that means for them on the road. Yes, ma'am.
I commend the two of you. We heard you before COVID when you had meetings, I
Oh.
guess, 19.
Thank you.
18. We went to one of the meetings and went on. We do give them terrific work. And we thank you. Are there any plans for warehouses in Hunterdon County that you're aware of besides the Exxon one?
So the questions around, are there other plans in Hunterdon County for warehouses? That's the only one I have heard about. You might know more.
Raritan Township.
Raritan.
Right on 202. In front of the,
Raritan Township on 202.
202.
US Bronx.
The corner of 202 and what? Voorhees Corner Road.
US Christmas tree warehouse on 31.
And Christmas Tree Warehouse on 31.
We're not 30.
Yeah, it's Clinton Town.
It's right on the south main,
Okay,
Which is
yeah.
that's already been approved with the land.
Did you have a question? Okay.
There's another question in the chat. Do you know, Tracy, do you know anything about the bills that are in the state assembly?
So there was a bill that was proffered by State Senator Sweeney before he left. And the bill was around warehouse development. And it stalled. Didn't make it up for a vote. And last I heard, it was hanging in the periphery.
Well, it was home rule, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's three bills that were introduced that the Skylands Coalition mentioned, of course. There was the conservation board, there's one of those organizations.
You have to speak up. I can't hear you, John.
There are 3 bills in the legislature referring to warehouses. I'm not sure what they were. I know at a meeting that I went to with New Jersey LCD, they have mentioned that there's 3 bills pending that either require like a regional planning and things like that.
Okay, John is saying that there are 3 bills pending that are about warehouse development, including regional planning pieces, which makes much sense to me. Anything else in the chat? I can't click on it, so I don't know.
They're asking for the Green Garden State Alliance slide.
Oh, sure. Yep, you bet. So there's a question, is a warehouse proposal made prior to a board meeting being scheduled? How can community organizations or the public stay ahead of the developers realistically? You have to be doing the Oprah request and you have to have somebody going to the meetings because before they put in an application, they put in preliminary or do preliminary exploratory things, generally speaking. And that's how you find out if they're there. And then have any New Jersey towns or municipalities actually implemented the recommendations published in the warehouse guidance document? That I do not know. Because it just came out in November. I attended a meeting on it in January. And I didn't see a lot of other feedback about it. And is there any list of warehouse proposals in New Jersey? No, and that's one of the things that we're trying to put together. Let's see. That's one of the things we're trying to put together with this Green Garden State Alliance is to be able to have a comprehensive overview of things.
You know, what's interesting about some of these warehouse developments, and it includes White Township, that like in Phillipsburg, warehouses aren't even full. They're building them on speculation that someone's gonna want to use their warehouses. So, you know, Tracy, you mentioned not seeing a incredible amount of traffic coming out of there because they're not all filled up and running. So it amazes me that, you know, they're just building on speculation, totally.
I want to add one comment. One of the things I've been learning about is we have some recognitions this year for green infrastructure to be done in development projects. So most municipalities do not have stormwater management plans put in place. They have all those parts. So one way that you can delay these projects is by going back through and using stormwater management, permeable asphalt, and those kind of things.
But I wanted to keep that here.
What was that?
What he just said, you might want to repeat, might not come to do.
You'll have to come.
Good luck.
That's why I say you should come up and tell me. I can't hear that well.
Why don't you try to put up the Alliance slide?
Yeah, I have it up for people on Zoom, but
Yeah.
One of the things I was saying is that you guys can actually do it right now. You only need 5 classes, and it's a free program that Rutgers is offering that you can get green infrastructure champion certified, and you become an asset for your community. So you become an asset at planning board meetings and things like that, and you can make the argument or the angle that, hey, all of the new regulations that the DEP is putting out for stormwater management, our municipality doesn't have a plan in place, or we don't have this department in place. So because of that, this can't happen. It's going to have a ripple effect of negative impact. And we are so far behind on this DEP thing. Like, that's the angle that I've been seeing. And the green infrastructure person can now become an asset and come in and say, here's what we can do instead. And here's how, like, well, not everybody can win, but we can win.
that's awesome. Thank you.
It's called Green Infrastructure Champions program. You just Google that, you'll find it. Rutgers is offering it right now. There's 10 classes. They're all online, and you get certified with only 5 of the classes. I think they've done 4 so far.
So there's a question about what does one do to make an Oprah request? So you can go online, if your town has a web page, and it's usually there under forms. Every town's Oprah form seems to look a little different. If they don't have it there, you can call your township clerk and either have them email it to you, the form, and then it's submitted back to the town clerk. So normally the town clerk is the person who fills your Oprah request. In our case, they're either ignored or the attorneys go through them and then answer them. So I hope that you don't see the challenges that we have had with our township. But they really took great offense at being sued. And it poisoned the well to some degree in terms of a working relationship with them. Yes, sir.
Best resource online for requests. Look up John Paff, PAFF. Towns are terrified of John Paff. He is a strong advocate for Oprah. His website will teach you basically how to go and do it. It's very simple.
So I don't know if you guys heard that, but he said if you don't know where it is, you can Google John Paff, PAFF, and he's the guru of how to submit Oprah requests and can walk you through the process. So I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties, guys, but I hope that this has been helpful. If there's anything that we can do, just shoot us an email at skylandspa@gmail.com. Happy to share the PowerPoint if you want to, keep the action items that we have found. Sorry if we went on too long about Franklin, but I thought it was important to kind of get a foundational understanding of how that process works and what the timeline looks like in order to be effective and to not be surprised when the fight goes on longer than you anticipate. So, thank you.
And the way those can be addressed, Tracy.
Just the very end, in the room, certainly people ask questions, stuff, please feel free to have one of the questions. And also for those who are willing and able, you can help us move some of the chairs to the side that would help us expedite the we need to, the building code check.
And that was, because that's what it is. But when you're going over there,
Here's the highway. This is off green. Let's Clinton Township. Okay. So right here, look for the warehouse.
I don't live there, but I drive through. It's so photograph.
So you've got Highlands. Now this is Clinton. This is all Clinton Township up here. Then between these two, which is part of the highway, they're putting a warehouse right here. And the river, as you can see, it's right here. They're coming in. Right off 31.
So have they already made an application? Is this?
What it was years ago, they were supposed to put a man. Building. And then during COVID.
Not as big as the meeting with Ireland.
We do Zoom meetings. And the next. I said, well, we don't have to go to Ireland, we really don't have to go anywhere. Because the land was already approved, but they needed the variance. And so they passed, but they waited.
So it's
still
done.
that one, and then they did here. We should get a kick out of 31. Where's the medical board? 31. Where the solar panels would be.
You need to write an email to send some powers to be to say that new computer.
Oh, I have.
So here,
Has to do it.
what they did is.
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell people.
it's funny.
They were able to put it